Hello, everyone. It is just 6, so we're going to give folks a couple minutes to trickle in. I know the waiting rooms got people popping in. So I guess you're not freshening up coffee at 6 p.m., but get whatever you need for a little hour of listening to our conservation priorities. And we'll kick off maybe in 2 minutes or so, Danny, if that sound good?
Sounds good. So I guess while we are waiting, we would love to hear where people are calling in from tonight. So maybe use the chat tonight to introduce yourselves, name, pronouns, where you're calling from in Illinois. And I think there's an ongoing thread going. What is your favorite evening drink, hot drink, whatever it might be? I see herbal tea from Rep Favorite Dias, coffee from David McAllis. So whatever it might be.
Great. And while you guys drop your introductions there in the chat, I'll go ahead and get us kicked off. I want to welcome you all to the IEC Conservation Priorities Town Hall series. This one is specifically on our conservation and open space priorities. So we have a rock star lineup of speakers from legislative champions to champions of the individual policy priorities and bills to talk to you about what we're excited about in 2026 for spring session. And the coolest thing about these town halls, and Danny might talk a little bit more about these, is that it is your opportunity to give us feedback and ask questions and dig into these, and you have the experts on the line to do that. So there will be a good amount of time at the end for questions and answers and chit-chatting about the priorities. But with that, let me figure out how to advance slides. There we go. I'm going to turn it over to Danny to just give a brief overview about IEC and our organization and why we come together to do things like this.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Robles. I am the Legislative Relations Director with the Illinois Environmental Council, and really happy to have all y'all tonight with us to talk about our priorities for our conversation sector in what we're expecting to advance or work on in 2026. Um, just a brief overview of about IEC. For the past 50 years, IEC has worked to safeguard Illinois, our people, our plants, animals, and the natural systems on which we all depend on by building power for the people and the environment. And we represent over 125 organizations. I believe that number is closer to 150 now, that operate across Illinois. And we carry our mission to advance public policies that create healthy environments across Illinois through education, advocacy, and movement building. So tonight is a lot about that education and advocacy. Tonight is our second town hall in our series of legislative town halls. Last week we talked about transportation. Tonight we're gonna have our conservation open space conversation and really discuss what are some of the items that our partners and affiliates are working on that we are looking to advance in the next legislative session, which will start in January. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our lead, Lindsay, to talk a little bit or introduce our keynote speakers who have been strong advocates for us at the legislature over the last several years.
Yeah, really quick, I realized I forgot my introduction because I know most of you and I was just in a room with my friends, but I am Lindsay Keeney. I'm our Chief Programs Officer here at IEC and I lead our conservation and agriculture work. So you might see me again if you tune into our food systems town hall in a couple weeks. But I have the pleasure of introducing to you two of our legislative champions who have helped us advance these priorities and priorities in the past. And I think first up is Representative Favre Diaz, who has really helped us champion the herbicide drift work. She's been out on tours with us to see some of the damage of herbicide drift, and she's just been a conservation and environmental champion across the board. So I'll turn it over to you, Rep. Favre Diaz.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you, and it's great to recognize some names of participants in the chat. I'm Rep. Laura Favre-Dias. I represent the 62nd District, which is Central Lake County. So Grays Lake, all of the Round Lake communities in Libertyville. I am passionate about open space and conservation. I think it really relates to my childhood. I grew up camping. My family had a little camper, and we literally traveled the entire country. We drove from southern Indiana all the way out to the Northern Cascades National Park. As a teenager, we traveled all over, and I think that's where I get my love of open spaces and knowing and understanding the importance of conserving our precious land. So I was excited and honored to work on House Bill 1596 last year, and looking forward to getting it over the finish line this year. So House Bill 1596 mandates the notification of pesticides by large-scale applicators around schools, parks, and nature preserves. Pesticide drift, and Kim Arendt Pritchard, who is the real expert, is going to talk more in depth. But pesticide drift is the movement of pesticide particles away from the intended target area. And research shows that that drift can occur for up to miles under certain conditions. And so we know there is evidence and research that it has a tremendous impact on children, especially on people, but especially children, because their bodies and neurological systems are still developing, as well as plants and vegetation. The Environmental Working Group published a report showing that there were over 4,000 U.S. elementary schools that were located within 200 feet of crop fields where these pesticides are sprayed regularly. We don't have the specific data for that number in Illinois, but we are working on compiling that through different sites. But we know it's over 4,000 for the entire U.S. The American Pediatric Association has even, so there's a bunch of environmental focused research, but the American Pediatric Association has even come out and recommended that children stay indoors when pesticides are sprayed. And so what is happening is when schools and children are playing outside during recess or during summer camp or during daycare, and large scale applications of pesticides are sprayed, it is drifting, and there is a smell and a taste. And so teachers and school leaders are having to hopefully rush the children indoors. And so our bill, House Bill 1596, would mandate that when that large scale application is occurring, that they must notify schools, parks, nature preserves, and child care facilities that are within a half mile of that large scale application. Prairie Rivers Network has been the real driving force in this legislation, and it has been such a treat and delight to learn from Kim, who's going to speak later and is so passionate about this. I've talked a lot about the focus on the impact of children. I'm a former public school teacher. I'm a mom. Two of my boys, actually, my boys went to a nature-based preschool. So I'm really passionate about the impact on children, but Kim can do a really wonderful and detailed job of the monitoring and the data collection that she has done on pesticide drift on vegetation. So thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to need some advocacy and support to move some of our colleagues. There is some significant opposition, and so from the Farm Bureau, and so we're going to need to push through the idea that this is a notification. This is simply about education and educating, so schools and parks and leaders can make an informed decision about how they want to handle when there is pesticide application happening. So thank you all for being here tonight, and thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Rep Mueller. Are you ready for us now, or should yes?
I
Okay. Who and Rep Mueller
ready or
has
not,
been
here I
great,
come.
and she has been a champion for us, especially tirelessly working on the wetlands bill with us year after year. I think we're on the third year now, and so
Yeah.
and David's going to walk us through that here in a little while, but I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay, David, Danny, Kim, all of our advocates, everyone who's on this call. Thank you so much for joining us. I represent the 43rd District, which is the Elgin, Carpentersville, Streamwood, Hoffman Estates area. And importantly, I have the Fox River that runs right through my district and right down the bike path from my house, and is a major source of drinking water for the region, and is also an important ecological feature for wildlife and native species. And I talk about that because it's related to the bill that we are working on, the Wetlands Protection Bill. We know that waterways and streams and wetlands are all connected, and the health of all of those different bodies are connected. And we know how important wetlands are in our country. And for several decades, the federal government regulated wetlands in the United States, recognizing how important they are to protecting wildlife, protecting native species, and all of the other protections that they provide. But in a decision called Sackett versus EPA at the Supreme Court level, the Supreme Court a couple of years ago gutted federal protections for wetlands under the Clean Water Act. At that time, we know that other Midwestern states had their own laws to fall back on. So those states already regulated wetlands. And so the federal government stepping away from regulation didn't make as much of an impact. Those wetlands are still protected. But unfortunately, here in Illinois, we do not have a regulatory framework to protect wetlands in Illinois. And so that's why Senator Laura Ellman and I introduced Senate Bill 3669 and House Bill 5386 to create a wetlands protection program that fills in the gap and keeps our waterways safe. So we know that wetlands are incredibly protected, are incredibly important. They're not just swamps, as has been characterized by people who may not know a lot about ecology. And I think they've been characterized that way by some of our opposition. They're the kidneys of our ecosystem. They're nature's defense systems. They absorb floodwaters, they filter pollution, they store carbon, and they protect wildlife. And unfortunately, here in Illinois, we've already lost about 90% of our original wetlands. The land that was developed before the federal government stepped in to protect those natural areas. And certainly we cannot afford to lose any more. So this legislation is about protecting those natural features. This is about protecting our clean drinking water, making our communities safe from flooding, and truly protecting what makes Illinois strong. And in so many cases, I've been incredibly proud, especially over the last during the first Trump administration and now under the second Trump administration. Illinois has a strong track record of stepping in when Washington steps back or abdicates its responsibility. And it's time for Illinois to step up again and protect our wetlands with Washington abdicating that responsibility. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Illinois Environmental Council and all of our partners who've been very instrumental. Dave McEllis has been a huge champion on this in making sure that we get this bill over the finish line and protect our wetlands before it's too late. So look forward to listening in and answering any questions that I can, and all of you helping to get this bill across the finish line next session. So thanks again.
Thank you both for all of your work supporting conservation and open space policy priorities over the last couple years. This community does not have a ton of champions in the legislature, so we very much appreciate your work. Next up, I'm going to introduce David McEllis, and I think we're going to do a little edit to the agenda and host wetlands Q&A right after David's piece so that he can hop off. And then we will launch into herbicide drift and then easement reform with Claire and Jim. So I'd like to introduce David McEllis, who's with Environmental Law and Policy Center and who has championed our wetlands protection bill for the last couple sessions.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you to Representative Mueller, because you just said all the things that I was planning to say. And for those folks who've been on this call in previous years, you know that I was probably just going to repeat myself from last year anyways. So this bill, as Representative Mueller said, is in response to the Sackett decision and creates an Illinois Wetlands Protection Act that fills in the blanks that were left behind when the Sackett decision gutted those wetlands protections at the federal level. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is that under a second Trump administration, the enforcement is not going to get better. And the rollbacks are going to continue. And so while the initial decision, the response to the initial Sackett decision was a Biden administration rulemaking to enforce that Supreme Court decision, the Trump administration is going to take that further, and they're going to cut the covered wetlands even further. So unlike surrounding states, half the states in the country, Illinois never passed a comprehensive state wetlands protection law. We have county protections in a handful of counties in the Chicagoland area, the suburbs, and some of the exurbs. But in the aftermath of the Sackett decision, those protections remain, but they've also put more work onto the counties to fill in the gap between the federal protections and the local protections. And the rest of the state is left with very little protection. Really only wetlands that are directly connected to flowing bodies of water remain connected. And so what that means is that if someone wants to fill in an isolated or more isolated, separated from a river, lake, or stream wetland, in many cases, they can do that without mitigation or replacement of that wetland. So we need to do something to protect what remains. That 90% was already destroyed. So to protect the 10% that remains, we've already seen the impacts of the lack of wetlands and increased flooding. We've seen 1,000-year rain events throughout the country, 4 in a week over the summer, including one of those 1,000-year rain events in Chicago, leading to flooding throughout the northeastern portion of the state. It's already an issue, and it's only going to get worse. Water needs a place to go. So increasing the number of wetlands in the state rather than filling them in should be the goal of the state. We introduced that legislation in 2024, then again in 2025, to create the Wetlands Protection Act. And Representative Mueller is the House sponsor and Senator Ellman is the Senate sponsor. The legislation had significant support. We very nearly had the number of votes that we needed the first year that we introduced it, but it stalled out due to some budget constraints and concerns from the Department of Natural Resources that they might not be able to run the permitting program and might not have the budget to run it. So with budget concerns in 2025, the bill stalled out again. What we hope to see going into the 2026 session from the Department of Natural Resources, they've discussed it doing a report that they're supposed to put together defining the protections that were lost due to the Sackett decision and defining the wetlands that are left unprotected in the state. And that will give them a scope of what they need to do to implement a full wetlands permitting program. So we're really hopeful that the DNR will have that report and that we can make it clear what exactly their role would be and go to the legislature and say this is a program that is important, that I think everyone has acknowledged is important. Wetlands and their flood and wildlife habitat resources are important in the state, and we hope that the governor will agree with that as well, and that his department will be able to run this. So we're hopeful that reintroducing that or having that bill go next year with the support of the Department of Natural Resources will help us to finally pass that bill and create that program to bring back those protections. And as Lindsay said, I'm really grateful that she's letting me hop off a little bit early to go tend to some parenting duties. And if anyone has any questions, happy to chat, or I will put my email in the chat as well.
I'm muted. Yeah, so you're more than welcome to drop questions there in the chat. David's throwing his email in there too. You may not have questions because we talk endlessly about this bill and this work. It may be old hat to many of you, but if you do, this is your chance to dig in and get your questions answered. And not seeing any questions popping in there. You can always message David too in the chat. This is not set up like a webinar, it's set up like a meeting. So you're welcome to keep dropping those in and message him. But I am going to move forward because we have a couple more priorities to get to and introduce Kim Ernst Pitcher with Prairie Rivers Network, who has absolutely championed our herbicide and pesticide drift work. And I'll turn it over to you, Kim, and I will run your slides. So you just tell me when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready for the first one. So I want to thank IEC and all of our partners, as well as Representative Favre-Diaz and Representative Moeller for all their support in this work. It's been incredibly important, and we greatly appreciate you. So as Representative Favre-Diaz mentioned, pesticide drift is a big concern in the state, and drift can occur from many different ways. Chemicals can leave their intended application site through chemical turf treatment. So we use herbicides like 2,4-D and dicamba, which are growth regulator herbicides, widely. You can buy them in the store. Turf treatment companies also apply them to lawns, as well as insecticides and fungicides. And these treatments, these pesticides, can not only move through the air, but they can also move through the water as runoff and into our streams and groundwater resources. Next slide. But the largest use of pesticides in the state actually is agricultural production. 75% of our land is in agricultural production. Much of this land is in herbicide tolerant soybeans and corn, which means you can apply herbicides not only beginning in the season, but throughout the growing season over the top of growing plants. You'll kill the weeds, but the crop itself will survive. This cropping system has really just enabled a heavy reliance on pesticides in general for pest control, whether they're weeds, insects, or fungal pests. Next slide. And so, drift, as was alluded to earlier, can happen, several ways. And you see this crop duster here, and you see that those particles of pesticide in the air, and they're moving. Some are moving down towards the crop itself, and many are also being moved with the prevailing winds off the intended target. So, that's a good example of drift that occurs at the time of application. We're also seeing drift that occurs after application. So a day later, 2 days later, the herbicide literally will volatilize or essentially evaporate off the plant and soil surfaces and move in the atmosphere long distances where it can fall out and cause injury at a landscape scale at some times. Next slide. So, it's drift injury is really impactful to the health of trees and plants. And so these are examples, these next few slides are photos of herbicide drift injury. And this is a peach down here in Southern Illinois that got injured by the herbicide dicamba. Again, it's used in turf treatments, but also widely used in agricultural production. On the right is an apple showing the same curling and cupping. You know, these are growth regulator herbicides. They really impact how these leaves and growing parts of the plant form and function. Next one. Here we have white oak, and this is a canopy shot. I mean, you can see these leaves are curled, they're cupped, their surface area is much smaller. Injuries like this are really widespread throughout the state year after year, and they impact these trees and plants' abilities to photosynthesize. It's a big stress for these plants to be injured like this for a whole growing season. These trees will not grow out of this injury. They will keep it until leaf fall. So as you can see, you know, even though we're looking up at the canopy, you can tell these leaves aren't flat and supple. Next slide. Again, another picture of an oak. This is a post oak, and you can really see those leaves are like boxing glove shaped. They're not flat and open up to the sun. I can also tell you that they're really leathery and they're tougher when they're injured like this. And, you know, oaks in particular are really important host plants for a lot of our biodiversity. And so that could impact the quality of the food that many of the moths and butterflies that feed off of those leaves require. Next slide. Most of you have probably seen a red bud that looks like this. This is a red bud that has been exposed to growth regulator herbicides, that 2,4-D dicamba in lawn care or in agricultural use. These cupping, curled leaves, these irregular wavy margins. This could be, you know, caused by you not understanding that when you apply these herbicides to your lawn, that you could be injuring your own tree, or it could come from a neighbor's application or a nearby field. Next one. And Lindsay, you can just click through these. This photo, these are photos of a state champion post oak. It's located in Washington County, Illinois. We've monitored this tree for many years, starting in 2017, and documenting symptoms of injury, taking leaf samples and having them analyzed. I think we've got a couple more clips here. And year after year, we've seen injury in this tree. And it's showing symptoms of stress. And one more.
One more.
Lindsay. And that is what a regular post oak leaf should look like. And as you can see, it's dramatically different than the leaves in this previous photos. And, you know, one of our concerns is the chronic stress like this. You know, this tree has not only experienced injury every year, but our tissue results, our analysis of the leaves that we send off for laboratory analysis indicate that this tree experiences multiple waves of drifting herbicides every season. So 2 to 3 exposures in a season. And that's just herbicides. That's not insecticides or fungicides. Next slide. So, you know, we have this thinning of the canopy. We have what's called epicormic branching. These leaves are growing out of the main branches of these trees, and these branches are dying back. And that's what is, you know, chronic injury looks like in these trees. And this is not just, you know, an impact to this ecosystem. It certainly is, you know, detrimental to lose oaks or our native trees in these ecosystems or our crops. It's very detrimental for our specialty growers. But you know, this is causing stress, but it's an emotional stress for the landowners and the land managers that are seeing this happen year after year. It's as well as an economic burden. It is not inexpensive to take down trees, whether you're a local park district, a school, or, you know, an individual. It costs a lot of money to take these trees down, and they can become hazardous. Next slide. So everywhere that we've been monitoring, and there's other organizations and entities looking at this as well, the Forest Service, other states are examining this problem, as well as the Natural History Survey. But one of the most frequent comments that we get is, you know, if it's impacting our trees, this much, what does it mean for us? And so we really wanted to put forward a piece of legislation that helped protect our communities and protect our children. And so, as Representative Feverdillas mentioned, House Bill 1596 requires certified pesticide applicators to provide written or email notice to the administrators of schools, daycares, and parks within a half mile of the application site. And this is really to give our communities information necessary to reduce pesticide exposure in our children. And we're hoping that it encourages greater communication with the farming community and the rural citizens that live in these environments, or even, the more urban collar counties and environments that are also experiencing drift from, golf courses, large parks and natural areas, as well as agricultural fields. So it's giving us an opportunity to take a step to protect our communities. And one more slide, and that is another bill that we are interested in this coming year with our partners is HB 1645, and this is a ban on the sale and use of the ester formulations of 2,4-D. And 2,4-D is one of those widely used herbicides that I mentioned in turf and agricultural use. It's known to be very volatile, this ester formulation. So you can apply it and it will move off site days after it's been applied. And we like this piece of legislation because it has the potential to reduce drift injuries caused by this high volatile formulation of 2,4-D, but growers still get to use the other formulations of 2,4-D. So we're not taking an entire pesticide off the market. We're taking the most dangerous form and having it banned for the state. And so that is all I have. And I'll turn it over for Lindsay if we're going to do questions or wait. I'll be around.
Yeah, I think we can do a couple questions now. We've got a couple in the chat, and then we'll have a larger question and answer at the end. But I see that Bob's asking if the pesticides get into the seeds and acorns.
So many of these pesticides are systemic, which means they are going to enter through all parts of the plant, whether it's, pollen, leaf tissue, nectar, or the meat in these acorns. And there has been some studies done in Nebraska. I'm not sure if they're published yet, but they've been looking at the tissue of acorns, and they have found dicamba and 2,4-D in the meat of acorns.
Great. I'm gonna move us along, but throw the questions in the chat as you think of them. For Kim, I think Kim's gonna hang out till the question and answer at the end, right?
Yes, and I can put my email in the chat as well.
Great. All right. Next up, I want to introduce Claire Ship with American Farmland Trust and Jim Johansson with the Conservation Fund. They have been working to think through what conservation easement improvements look like here in Illinois and how to incentivize those. I know we've done a little bit of easement work last year. We had some success with the Indigenous Conservation Easement Bill. Jim worked really hard on that to add Indigenous tribes to the list of eligible entities for conservation easements. And I know in those conversations with not just decision makers and legislators, but with our affiliates and friends and partners, we learned that we have a lot of work to do in explaining and talking about conservation easements and getting the education out there about this really important conservation tool that we have in our tool belt. So I'm excited about this work, and I'm going to turn it over to Claire and Jim so they can talk to you about some of their ideas for 2026.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And I'm gonna replace your current
Yes.
screen sharing if that's okay.
I'm gonna stop. There you go.
Thanks. And yeah, sorry to be difficult. The animations, I couldn't replicate them.
It's less difficult for me. I get to take a little break. I'll snack on my supper.
Yeah, but yeah, great to see you all. For those of you who haven't met yet, my name is Claire Ship, and I'm the Midwest Policy Manager for American Farmland Trust. Could someone just give me a thumbs up that you can see my presentation? Great, thank you. Yeah, as Lindsay said, Jim and I are going to talk about the Illinois Land Conservation Incentives Act. We're going to talk about this later. There may be new branding names to come, but this is the same bill that was filed under the Illinois Land Conservation Act name last year. And the goal is, yeah, to protect our farms and natural lands. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. As many of you know or have alluded to experiencing yourselves, Illinois has more than 120,000 miles of rivers and streams that have provided us some of the most unique and special lands, natural lands, and productive and resilient agricultural lands in the country, if not the world. But because of suburban sprawl and development, Illinois has lost more than 90% of our wetlands, 99% of our prairie lands, 68% of our forest lands. I'm repeating things that you already know and are experiencing in your day-to-day life when you drive through, especially like the more rural areas of Illinois where we see warehouses popping up or suburban areas popping up and seeing our natural lands going away. This is a map that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. There are only 2,000 acres of remaining prairie lands, which is less than 0.01% of what the state used to have. And at the same time, this is where my expertise is coming from American Farmland Trust. Illinois is losing lots of farmland. Illinois paves over around 48 acres of farmland each day. Like today, 48 acres of farmland were paved over in the state. And AFT's projections show that Illinois stands to lose an additional 360,000 acres before 2040, which, just to put that in like an economic perspective, that's 1,600 jobs and $218 million in farm output. And no, it's 1,600 farms, 3,400 jobs. So a lot more jobs. And it's even more concerning because, like I said at the start, this is some of the nation's most productive and resilient farmland that can be adapted to different crops to grow different kinds of food as the climate evolves. And so what we're hoping to do is protect this land, both farmland and natural land, so that we have habitat, so that we have soil to sequester carbon, so we have soil to filter our water and our air, all of those good things. And part of that is leveraging funding to do land protection, because land protection is not cheap, as many of the folks on this call know. And Illinois is losing out on lots of match funding for land protection. My area of expertise is farmland protection, so that's what I'm going to talk about. The ASAP-ALS program is a federal program that provides 50% match funding for the purchase of agricultural conservation easements to permanently protect farmland. And because it requires 50% match funding, it's not used that much in Illinois. Illinois currently only uses around $430,000 a year. Comparatively, states that have the Illinois have a transferable tax credit for land protection, like the one we're going to talk about. Like Colorado, who was one of the first states to use this tax credit, leveraged $56.2 million in federal funding for state farmland protection. That's a crazy difference, and one of the main reasons we really need to see this bill pass. And yeah, I mean, if we're able to leverage this funding, there's lots of wide-reaching impacts for a wide range of audiences and people in Illinois. From AFT's perspective, this is a huge farm viability issue. Agricultural conservation easements allow farmers to reinvest in their operations in equipment that could allow them to implement conservation practices. It allows them to take risks and diversify their operations in ways that they might not be able to otherwise. It also helps provide clean drinking water by preventing us paving over our soils that filter our waters. And it allows us to maintain recreation and tourism, which is critical to making sure that young people and all people have access to the outdoors and the ability to make those memories that spark a care about conservation in this work that we do. It also helps improve local economies by ensuring we have continued food production and those tourism industries, GHG emission reductions from soil sequestration, and wildlife habitat. I think one of the best things about farmland protection is that it can be a wildlife habitat corridor and a kind of a buffer between our most special and precious natural lands and the built environment, which is a way I think, yeah, these goals intersect. I will stop talking and pass it over to Jim for the more complicated of what this bill does.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So I get the fun task of talking to y'all about tax policy. So if you weren't already falling asleep, now's your chance. Thanks for sticking with us this long. Just real quick, a couple of quick notes about myself. My official job title is Illinois State Director. I work for a group called the Conservation Fund. We're a national nonprofit organization. We operate in all 50 states, and we have a dual mission of conserving land and water and sustainable economic development. So this bill, at the end of the day, like Claire said, it's designed to put cash in the pockets of landowners who are going to do the right thing of protecting their rural lands for perpetuity. And one small point of clarification, this is voluntary, obviously. Nobody's land is going to be quote unquote taken by virtue of this bill. And it applies to both landowners who donate a conservation easement, which we sometimes refer to as a land protection agreement, or they just donate their entire property, the full fee simple interest. Notably, whatever property interest is donated, it has to be donated to a qualified conservation entity. In this case, that's either a unit of government, including Indian tribes, or a conservation-focused nonprofit organization, like the one I work for, or the one that Claire works for, or one of the other 30 or 40 conservation-focused nonprofit orgs that work in Illinois. And it has to produce a conservation outcome. It can be farmland, it can be open space, it can be natural habitat, but it has to produce some sort of public benefit in the form of a conservation outcome. Landowners who do that are eligible to receive an income tax credit. We're getting really into the nitty gritty here, but basically they can claim 100% of the value of the property interest that they donate, and that's important. You'll see why in a second. There's a cap. No landowner can claim more than $500,000 per donation, and they can use that donation over a period of years. That just really depends on what their income tax liability is like. If they're a very high income person, they can probably use the full value of the credit against their income taxes in year one. If they're a lower income landowner, they may have to spread it out over a few years. Also importantly, this bill does have a annual cap. We're not going to give out more than 7.5 million credits in a single year, and it's on a first come, first served basis. So if you donate an interest and you're not able to get your credit in year one, you can be put on a waiting list and try to claim it down the road. Next slide, please. So here's how all that works in practice. Let's say that Farmer Smith has a farm. He wants to make sure that that farm is going to stay a farm forever. It's going to be around for future generations. And he wants to do that by donating a conservation easement to his local forest preserve district, soil and water conservation district, nonprofit, doesn't matter. We bring in an appraiser, and the appraiser determines that the value of that easement is $200,000. So right now in this state, we can tap into the federal ASAP-AIL program. Don't ask me what ASAP-AIL stands for. It's a very long acronym. And ASAP-AIL will pay up to 50% of the value of that easement, which is $100,000. Problem is that ASAP-AIL requires that 50% match. And right now there is no reliable source of funding to match ASAP-AIL, which is why all of these other states are getting ASAP-AIL funding and Illinois is getting next to nothing. So if Farmer Smith is willing to donate the other 50%, that's that red box you see there. Let's bring up the next graphic. Farmer Smith submits the appraisal and the application to the state agency that is administering this tax credit program. At that time, the administering agency sends Farmer Smith a credit, or I'm sorry, a tax credit certificate equal to the value of the interest that he was donated. In this case, it's $100,000. So next up, Farmer Smith really has two options. If Farmer Smith has significant income tax liability, he can use that pathway one that you see kind of in the middle of the screen there. Again, he's given a certificate saying he has a credit worth $100,000. He can claim 20,000 in year one, 10,000 in year two. He can spread that out and, uh, take that as a credit over 5 years. Or he can claim it all in year one if he has really high tax liability. Or let's just say Farmer Smith, like a lot of farmers, have very low income tax liability. He can now use the transferability of the tax credit to cash out in year one, and then somebody else who has a higher tax liability can use that credit. The way that works is that Farmer Smith sells the credit to a broker for a little bit less than a little bit less than what its full value. So in this case, $85,000. And he also has to pay a fee in order to transfer that credit that he just sold to the broker. So at the end of the day, Farmer Smith is netting $82,000 and some change on top of the $100,000 that he already received from the ASAP Ale program. That's the blue bar in the top left of the screen. And it doesn't show it on this graphic, but then that broker can turn around and sell the credit that the broker bought from Farmer Smith. And the broker can sell that credit to somebody with really serious income tax liability that needs the credit more than Farmer Smith. So at the end of the day, what do you have? Farmer Smith has some serious cash in his pocket. He can reinvest that in his farm. He can do whatever he wants with it. He can send his kids to college. And we have a farm that's going to be around in perpetuity, providing clean drinking water, tillable farmland, wildlife habitat, all of those good things that we saw on the previous slide. And I think, we're going to talk about next steps. Claire, do you want to talk about this or should I?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and you can fill in any gaps I leave. Thanks, Jim, for going through the complicated details so I don't have to this evening. Always appreciate that. Yeah, so that's what our goals are, what the bill does. And so looking forward, thinking about next steps, we're hoping to reintroduce the bill because we updated some of the language in the prior bill from earlier this session. It has already passed all of its deadlines. So we're hoping to reintroduce the bill, and we're hoping Senator Martwick and Representative Guzzardi will be our legislative champions again. And as I teased earlier, we're working on a new bill name and a new coalition name as a strategy to kind of hopefully focus this on supporting farmers, which it does, and framing it in a creative and more engaging way than talking about tax, maybe, because sometimes that puts people to sleep. So if you have ideas about acronyms, send them to Gemini. We're looking for ideas. So all of that will be to come soon. We do have a webinar coming up next Monday for any of you who are interested. And it's going to be about kind of all of this, but more in depth about what land protection really means in practice, and how conservation easements work and how land protection works. And then we're going to get some examples from Jim's colleague Emmy at the Conservation Fund about how this actually worked in their RCPP program. And then we're going to have Dave Bishop there to speak about protecting his farm and what that meant for him and his community, and then do some question and answer. So would love to see you guys there if you're able to join. And anyone who joins will get the recording and the follow-up materials, even if you can't be there live. At that webinar, we're hoping to launch a public petition in support of state investment and land protection that we're going to continue sharing out for a long time to come. So keep that on your radar and share it with your networks and anyone who cares about this work. We'll also have an organization sign-on letter that we'd love to see you guys eyes on eventually, and a fact sheet with a Mythbuster section, because as Lindsay and Jim have explained, this stuff can get complicated really quickly. And so we just want to make sure everyone has the language they need to talk about it effectively. And yeah, I saw Lindsay's comment briefly about her eyes being closed, and I'm so sorry. I'm so
No,
sorry.
this isn't even the first presentation I've seen today with that photo out, in fact.
And I guess, yeah, if you want to be more involved in this work, directly reach out to Jim or I, or if you just have questions, we're always happy to chat about it. Jim, did you have anything to fill in on next steps?
No, thanks for covering it.
Great. Okay, so I've seen folks have been dropping questions in the chat, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we had for Kim. Let me get back up there. Joyce Blumenshine was asking Kim about how you know what your lawn treatment companies are using. She says, what about the contents of Mosquito Joe and different urban type lawn treatments? How does the public find out about the contents of those? She's had prairie plants leaves that have curled up and died after neighbors' lawn treatments.
So you can ask your neighbors, you know, what services they're using. You can also, all of these providers of lawn treatment need to have MSDS sheets on, and they need to be able to tell you what they are applying, so that it can be tricky if they're not applying to your property. So that's why you might need to go to your neighbor and find out what they're having done to their lawn. But you can also try to connect with the applicator if you happen to see them, and just ask them, because you are concerned about what might be happening on your own property. And I do know people that have done that.
Cool. All right, next one is from Thomas, who's asking why the Farm Bureau is in opposition to the notification piece.
So Lindsay and Representative Favre-Diaz, you might want to chime in on this one too. You know, I think in general, anything that puts added restrictions on agricultural producers is going to be opposed by the Farm Bureau. But I think one of the big concerns is this going to be too much of a burden for them, this notification? And we're trying to ensure that it's not going to be, and that it's definitely worth their while.
And if you're a Farm Bureau member, Thomas, I'm sure they would love to hear that this is important to you, and caring about our kids and their health is it's valuable.
I just want to, I agree, Kim. I think that, yeah, that's the perfect summation of their opposition. And just to highlight, the Farm Bureau has done a really good job creating relationships with legislators who don't live in large agricultural areas through Adopt a Legislator program. And so they have because of that, they have some very effective lobbying in place um, for people who don't live in rural areas. And so that is where I think it's going to be really important that we strategically think about how we can get constituents of those legislators to reach out to their legislators, educate them about this issue. It's just, there is nothing more impactful than hearing from your constituents that they want you to vote for something. And so I think that it will be a key piece because of the strong relationships that the Farm Bureau has very effectively created through their Adopt a Legislator program.
Thank you. Next up, this is a question for Jim, and I saw that you answered in the chat, but you might go ahead and answer out loud too. George was asking, what's the typical easement value per acre, and how many acres are we talking about in this example?
Yeah, good question. So in that example, we were saying the easement value was $200,000. If you're protecting farmland around the Chicago metro, that's like right on the fringe of the urban sprawl and development, $200,000 might be a 20-acre farm. But if you're in a more rural area that has seen little or no development pressures, $200,000 could be a 200-acre farm. It just entirely depends on the local market more than anything. So in general, the rule of thumb is if the land itself is very expensive, the easement value is going to be high. If the land itself is comparatively cheap, the easement value is going to be lower.
Thanks, Jim. And then we have a question from Jennifer back to Kim and Rep. Diaz. Will the school pesticide bill cover all schools, including religious boarding, private and independent schools? Will it cover other places where children congregate, like YMCA's, summer camps, daycares, etc.? And then what do penalties for applicators look like if the bill's passed? And are there any enforcement mechanisms in the bill?
So, for the language for 1596 for childcare facilities, we reference the Child Care Act of 1969. So it just kind of depends on how that is characterized. So, like YMCA's, if they are designated under that child care, so we very explicitly in statute tied it back to previous definitions that are already in statute. I would need to look back at the language, Kim, you may know off the top of your head about in terms of religious boarding, private, independent schools. It's all going to go back to that original definition. And
Yeah.
then go ahead.
If they are state registered schools, whether they're public, private, if they're a state registered education center, then yes, that would apply to them.
And yes, there are penalties for applicators under the Department of Agriculture in this.
Yeah, and some of that I think is we're in the process of still having conversations to negotiate some of that.
You. Any other questions for our rockstar speakers today? About either wetlands, easements, or pesticide drift? And oh, here's one. Are there already rules around pesticide applications near schools in Illinois?
Those of you who have been around longer, there may be. I know there is a buffer of application within a certain radius next to schools. I don't remember that off the top of my head. And I know we also passed a bill about pesticide application on school grounds. It cannot happen during the day. But that buffer, I would need to refer to someone else.
Yeah, Kim, do you know?
Yeah, so there is a buffer bill, but it's only for restricted use pesticides, and most of the pesticides that we use in agricultural production and turf management are not restricted use. So it would cover pesticides like atrazine, and if dicamba is reauthorized for over the top of soybeans again this year, that would be considered a restricted use, but the majority of other herbicides like glyphosate and 2,4-D, they are not restricted use. So they do not, that buffer does not apply to them. And that's, I think it's a 500-foot buffer.
Thanks, Kim. All right, any last questions? We're right up at time and I won't keep anyone any longer, but our speakers have dropped their information in the chat. If you want to connect with one of them and missed their information, shoot me an email and I can connect you. Anything last minute, last questions to sneak in? If not, I will let you all go. It's getting a little loud here at my house. We've got folks coming out to try to see the northern lights out here in the country. So I saw some of you guys up north, even close to Chicago, got a little bit of a show last night. That's so cool. So cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I do want to do a quick plug. Our next town hall is tomorrow. It's the Zero Waste Town Hall. Gabby on our staff will be hosting, and we have some speakers too. Anything else to add on that one, Danny? You can still register. If you haven't yet, you can reach out to one of us to get the link if you need it.
Nothing else to add. Just thank you everyone for joining, dropping the link for the town hall in the chat. And hope to see some of y'all tomorrow as well.
Great. Thank you guys. See you later. Have a good evening. And Hannah, you'll save the recording, right? Do I need to do anything else? Hopefully not. All right. Good night.